So what about the idea of doing something like wearing a radioactive stone so that I'm exposing my body on a continuous basis to a low-level radiation with the idea that I'm going to have a stronger immune system because of it, and I'm going to be able to fight pathogens as they come my way?
Well, as in most things in science, the numbers are very important. And you have to say how radioactive and that kind of thing. There is nothing theoretically that says that won't work. And so I think the question is, in the eating of the pudding,
the proof is in the pudding.
If it works, it works.
I actually, with a rock from a radon mine, I put it on the bookshelf about a foot, a little more than a foot, 15 inches from my spleen back when I lie on my side, because I think that's the most sensitive area for healing.
The spleen, that's interesting. What leads you to that idea?
Well, it's the center for white blood cell regeneration.
Uh-huh.
And the white blood cells are very strong in immunity. So it builds up your immunity the best, I think. If I take a Geiger counter to that rock, it says boom, 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 boom. And the closer you get to go, the faster it goes. Brrr. And if you put it right next to it, it goes brrr. And the point is that you're getting different rays as you get it closer and closer. As you keep it away from your body, you're only getting mostly gamma rays. As you get it within an inch or so, you're starting to get some beta rays. If you get it very, very close, quarter of an inch or so, you're getting alpha rays. I'm guessing that if I put it next to my skin, that I would get a burn there.
Yeah.
And that was the first indication of the harm from radiation.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it was also the first quantitative estimate of how much radiation you got, was the reddening of the skin. Also giving an awful lot of radon out of there. It's just a radon fountain.
Is there any other way that you incorporate your understanding of the beneficial effects of low-level radiation into your life?
Well, I think the radon mine is good, and these radon clinics are good, and they would know quite a lot about it. They have walls painted with radioactive material.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Whole rooms are.
I think we've hit on something that's really revolutionary.
Well, the other thing, Alan, is that it changed my whole philosophy about nuclear power.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
you're pro-nuclear?
I am now.
You are? But nuclear power creates high-level radiation that's harmful.
What happened in Chernobyl cannot happen here because we have safeguards. We have safeguards.
Yeah.
And so when 3 Mile Island blew, virtually nothing happened.
That's right. And, well, you can't be too safe. Yeah, you can. I mean, if you put gadgets in that introduce new modes of failure, and the only we've had 2 fuel melt failures in 450 reactors or something like that in the last 50 years. One of them was 3 Mile Island, and that's the start of the China syndrome. 20 tons of molten fuel slump down onto the pressure vessel and starts the China syndrome. You know how far it got on that journey? 3/8 of an inch.
I remember one funny story that occurred in the laboratory, that we were doing studies on this one carcinogen, and the technicians in the lab were just terrified. We had a solution of less than 1/100%. And so they were, wearing gloves and doing it in safe boxes. And they were threatening to quit because it was a dangerous carcinogen in their mind. And then we were sitting around at lunch, and one of the technicians was sitting there putting cream on her skin. And we looked, and it was a 1% solution, 100 times more of the same carcinogen. And it was being prescribed to her. So there is a strange disconnect.
In the spring of 1951, the editors of the National Guardian, a small weekly that was then in its second or third year, had asked me, I had covered a few other trials for them, to look at the trial record of the Rosenberg case and make a suggestion as to whether or not I thought there was a story in there that had not been covered by the press. At the time, the entire country, there were 1,750 newspapers in the country, and there wasn't a single publication anywhere in this land or in the world that had challenged the fact that these defendants had given the secret of the atom bomb to the Soviet Union.
There was no challenge of that?
Not a single word until I had started writing about it. But so that my mind was a blank. I was a working left-wing journalist at the time, covering a couple of major trials that were going on, but we didn't, as left-wing people, pay any attention to the Rosenberg case at the time it was in court. Everyone thought of it simply as a spy case.
Why was it that they were not interested or following that through?
Well, you have to do a study on the American press and see what a complete adjunct of the establishment it is. I then took the court transcript, and the thing that was so astonishing to me, and I think it probably changed my life around, is that in looking at this transcript and expecting to see all kinds of evidence about cloaks and daggers and secrets and things like that, that all the kinds of accoutrements that go along with espionage, what I found, to my enormous astonishment, is that 98% of the evidence in this famous Atom spy case had to do with these defendants' politics. What books did you read? What meetings did you attend? Did you ever read the Daily Worker? Did you ever sign a communist nominating petition? Now, these are traditional political rights that our founding fathers had protected for us in the First Amendment. Our First Amendment to our Constitution says people can assemble where they want, can have whatever religion, which means whatever politics they want, they can associate with whom they want, and yet the bulk of the evidence in the Rosenberg case simply attacked their left-wing politics, not their criminal acts.
Yeah, the question of people that are spies or thought to be in a spy trial situation, that there's a special category of thinking in terms of your territory and
well, none of us likes to be thought of as a traitor to our native land.
But
no matter what kind of, I mean, a radical, a person that is proud to say I'm a radical would not be proud to say I'm a traitor. The one and only crime in this nation that is defined in our Constitution is the crime of treason. And the reason for that is that there were so many abuses in England, where most of our forefathers came from, the people that wrote our Constitution had come from. There were so many abuses with people being hanged and killed and branded and drawn and quartered, literally had their bodies cut in half and in quarters, and then had their entrails burned in front of them before they were strung up. For being traitors. And no one knew actually what the crime was. The proceedings were held in camera, in Star Chamber proceedings. All that the populace knew in those days was that it was a terrible crime. They were taken from the prison and taken 5 or 10 miles to where they were hanged. And that's why our founding fathers, or that kind of abuse, the abuses of the treason concept in England, was why our founding fathers specified that no one can be convicted of the crime of treason unless there are 2 witnesses to the same overt act. It's the only crime that the Constitution defines.
That's interesting.
Once you were able to connect communism as an idea with the treasonous act and make them synonymous and undifferentiated and undistinguishable, there you had a means of getting around the First Amendment.
Yeah, that was coming.
Winston Churchill at Fulton, Missouri, made what is called this famous Iron Curtain speech, and with Harry Truman sitting at his side, he delivered this speech. He'd just been turned out of office by the British electorate, but he made this speech in which he said there's an iron curtain that separates us from the people of the East and the Soviet Union. And he made this speech in the context of a month-long of newspaper headlines about a 26-man atom spy ring that had been discovered in Canada. Mm-hmm. And he made that speech in the context when the Soviets are trying to steal our secrets and blow us up, we can't be friendly with them. And in one way or another, that kind of syndrome has been going on for 40 years. The fact of the matter is that not a single one of these 26 persons headlined in the newspapers as atom spies was ever convicted of espionage. 16 of the people never were convicted of anything. 5 of them went to prison because they had gone to Spain under false passports in 1936. Is what we call disinformation. Brainwash the American people in a barrage that has continued for 40 years almost without let-up.
To brainwash the American people and to brainwash people and to create, in a certain sense, scapegoats.
For a time, we had these major cases that occupied, this was in the days when there wasn't too much television,
yes,
but when there were 15 daily newspapers in a city like New York, you had headlines for 2 and 3 years on end about the spy stealing our secret for Russia. This is about giving the secret of the hydrogen bomb to Russia, giving the secret of the atom bomb.
Oppenheimer.
So that, not Oppenheimer, he was never arrested. I'm talking about Klaus Fuchs and the Rosenberg. So that you had the treachery of one person, allegedly, the alleged treachery of one person that could result in the whole planet being blown to bits. With nobody to challenge that notion, it's no wonder that the American people bought this story lock, stock, and barrel. The defense that those men and women, those 19 men and women took, the accused witches, was identical with the defense that Alger Hiss and the Rosenbergs took at their trials.
What is that defense?
Namely, the 19 men and women who were tried as witches in Salem, every one of them said the same thing. Every one of them said, I'm not a witch, I'm not guilty, but pointing to their accusers, these little 13-year-old girls that were part of the prosecution evidence against them, they said, of course my accuser, of course those girls were at a bonfire with the devil. They were there with the devil, I know that, but somehow they made a mistake and they thought that I was there also. Now, in the Rosenberg and the Hiss cases, at the trials, as opposed to what we now know, but at the trials, the defendants did the same thing. Alger Hiss accepted lock, stock, and barrel everything that the government's one and only witness against him said, Whittaker Chambers. The only challenge to Whittaker Chambers' story from the defendant, Alger Hiss, was when Whittaker Chambers mentioned Hiss, what he did with Hiss. But if Chambers says, I was a better communist than Stalin, I was a Communist Party employee for 13 years, I did this and I did that, there was no challenge to it whatever. 30 years later, we now know, even though 2 presidents have come into the White House because of this bunkum, it's like a carnival sideshow. If you try to go and look and check it out, as it's taken me 20-odd years to do, it's a total fantasy. Chambers said he was a Communist Party functionary for 13 years. I can establish he wasn't a Communist Party functionary for 13 minutes. A lot of convicted and accused spies. I've never yet to meet anybody that admitted he was a spy. But I've known the Rosenberg children, I've known their mother, I've known Morton Sobel, I've known Alger Hiss, I was a co-plaintiff with him, I knew Judith Copeland. But I just want to...
There have been spies in the history of the world, and there have been traitorous spies to a political entity and nation in the history of the world. It is a phenomenon that does and has existed.
I'm sure there's a lot of things in the history of the world. All that I know is that in the Cold War America, in all the major spy cases, and I've either covered them or read the entire courtroom transcript of Remington, Copeland, the Canadian atom spies, Klaus Fuchs, Alger Hiss, Julius Rosenberg, Morton Sobel. I know that all of those cases are as phony as a $12 bill.
Phony.
Phony. Bunkum. The way you sell bunkum, snake oil at a circus. And time of such hysteria, and nobody, including the defense lawyers or the defendants themselves, were able really at that time to have a full grasp of what really was taking place.
And we really did run roughshod over the judicial processes.
at the time of the Rosenberg case, and when you talk about judicial process, one of the kinds of things that is the glory of our legal judicial system is the right of a defendant to have a bill of particulars, to know in advance of trial what the government or what the prosecution or what the state is charging him with, what crime he's accused of, so that in open court he can meet that crime. In September of 1950, right after the arrest of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, when their lawyers asked the government simply to give them a list of bill of particulars, because the charge against them was that there was no specifics at all. The charge against them that they had conspired at 6 different conversations at which there was no specifications of what took place at the conversations to give the secret to the atom bomb. When they asked for a bill of particulars, the then U.S. Attorney Irving Sapo, promoted to judge after the trial as a reward for his good work, said, and he's quoted in the New York Times, you can look it up in September of 1950, nothing else would serve these defendants than if we were to give them the secret of the atom bomb. I mean, it's just such an obscene characterization of a simple request to say, what are we charged with? And he responds in that way, the defendants would like nothing except for us to give them the secret of the atom bomb, and that was reported in the New York Times, and the court upheld the government's refusal to give the defendants anything, including the specifications of what the overt acts were that they allegedly had done. I keep a spy folder at home. It's this thick.
Yeah, you're the authority.
It's about 3 foot thick. Yeah. And the basic rule that I find is that every one of these spy cases, when they break into the news, is an ironclad case that you absolutely are totally convinced of. The person is 100% guilty beyond any question whatsoever. Every one of them. And the second part of that, I find that with the passage of time, every one of these cases becomes less and less and less credible once you get to know more fact. Now that J. Edgar Hoover is dead, I think I can probably safely say I'm the only person in the Western world that really knows what went on in the courtrooms. I at least can say I'm not relying on what someone has told me or what I've read in the headlines or what I've read in a book. I'm talking about what is in the evidence that was submitted in the courtroom. And I know all the evidence, at least I've read the records or I've covered the trials, and I'm talking on the basis of the courtroom evidence. I am saying that all of these cases are phony and incredible.
I asked the unaskable question, why did you do radiation and chemo high level?
Well, because I've got this other problem with my lungs, and they think it might be hereditary. And I had to get rid of this cancer before I can check out this other and see if I've got family, and I need to check this out and see if there's a cure for this other too. So I had to get rid of this cancer quick if we could.
Well, and what do you think about that, Dr. Bev?
You know, the fibrosis is something that's in his lungs, and he had to get rid of the cancer so it would not be a secondary for his fibrosis. Once the cancer is out of there, then they can deal with the fibrosis.
And what is fibrosis?
Fibrosis is growths in your lungs that turn them like leather. They do not get the expansion, they cannot expand for him to breathe.
And that's separate from cancer?
It is separate from cancer. It's an entirely different one. And I'm not sure if it's inheritable or not. Did they ever tell you
They
that?
haven't decided yet for sure.
They haven't decided.
If it's hereditary.
Yeah, if
Right.
it's hereditary.
And that's what he was hoping that it wasn't. It was not, because he has 2 sons. And,
Is there any other way of dealing with that? If radiation hormesis can't do it?
The cancer or the
leathery stuff,
fibroids?
The leather, whatever it was that made him do such an aggressive therapy.
No. I think it just was that he did not want the cancer to get so severe. And that's why he went ahead and did that.
I guess I'm confused. What's the difference between fibrosis and cancer?
Well, this here, the fibrosis just turns the leathers of the lung like a leather. They crackle. Just
But
kind of
fibrosis is
dry.
non-malignant.
Yeah, it's
And then
non-malignant.
cancer is just a sore cancer.
But you didn't think that the hormesis could help the cancer?
Well, I don't know.
No, the
I'm
cancer.
sure it can.
I think it'll get rid of his cancer without any problem at all. and that just gives him a new lease on life.
But you don't think it will help the fibrosis?
I think it'll help the fibrosis, but not at
The pace that you
yes,
needed.
right. And we wanted to get rid of the cancer first.
But I keep getting confused. Get rid of the cancer first or the fibrosis? Because I thought, because the cancer, I talked to a lady named Maxine Murray who dealt with a patient whose breast cancer was oozing from February until July, and overnight with a hot rock, it stopped the oozing, and within 5 days, nice new pink skin was growing over the 6 oozing sores. So I know it can work very quickly. To me, that seems to be getting rid of cancer quickly.
Yes, it does. But as he said, you know, he wanted to make sure this wasn't inheritable by his children. So he went up and did the radiation and the chemotherapy to
I can see why you wanted to be here today, you know?
Oh, he knows half the people that are here, if not all of them.
But go on, because I'm still struggling. Maybe in editing I'm going to understand this better, but I'm just a little confused.
The fibrosis is such a dilapidating disease because it turns it to leather. Your lungs should be very supple. They should be able to breathe in and out. What it would do would literally turn it to stone. Okay?
So were they afraid that he was going to die from the fibrosis before he was going to die from the cancer?
Right.
So high-level radiation is good to break up the leather?
No, it was just to kill the cancer.
Kill cancer.
Yeah.
What would you have done?
That's an unfair question.
That's an unfair question?
I think that's an individualized question.
Well, see, I'm supposed to...
If I hadn't had no family, there wouldn't have been no question.
Yeah, it was a family issue. It was a family issue.
I wouldn't have,
Okay,
I wouldn't have considered the high.
He would have stayed right with me and done everything that I needed him to do.
That's pretty typical, though. That's pretty typical, and I think that's in many ways why people come here for 10 days. I think, don't you think, Jane? You're a psychologist, a psychoanalyst. Don't you think?
Are you asking?
I'm asking a professional opinion.
Do people come here because they're so fearful about
their family's reaction?
All of the reaction is their health. I want to see how. If it hadn't been for my other kids' health or my kids' health and things, I would have even considered going and taking the radiation chemo. I just stayed here with.
I think I'm missing something, Jane. What am I missing?
No, I'm missing it too, but I got something else.
Am I hearing you correctly that you basically did this because you want to be here for your family?
I want to find out what's causing it for my family, the fibrosis.
Because it's a genetic? You think it's a genetic? So you want to make sure that they don't get it and that you got it handled. Yes, I understand. Okay, yeah.
How do you make sure they don't get it?
Yeah.
Well, if it's genetic and he has it and he can heal it, then it will not be passed on because then they know what to do, if I understand correctly. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, if they can find a cure for it,
yes,
we can stop it. But if
right.
we can't, why, it wasn't. I didn't waste nothing, I guess we're doing it, but then.
He was after a cure for fibrosis. Found out he had cancer. So they wanted to do chemotherapy and radiation.
Well, what is the cure for fibrosis?
They don't know.
They don't know.
So what did he go and do? Who suggested high-level radiation?
That's for the cancer.
The Jewish hospital in Denver. The lung specialist in Denver.
Voices are singing, bells are a ringing, dance of the good. Lift up your arms and shout, join hands, skip along, dance and put hands. Turn left, turn right, hold tight, lift your feet, heart, wow, lift your voice, fill the house, string your
I have a sign above my rock shop says because people are dying. Okay, very small. And if you go in there, you'll see number one, there's no.
Jay, that's the name of our book. What?
Because people are dying.
Yeah.
That's what's on the shop.
I think it's a great title. Do you like that?
Yes.
Because people are dying. Jay and I are going to do a book together.
miles of bad road ahead. A detour.
If you just use the information that's there, that I'll get to you. Everything I do here has been proven historically, scientifically. Show you where to go to. Remember, it's your body.